I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all for being here tonight in this warm, toasty room. Unfortunately, our our AC doesn't seem to be catching up with the heat, so I apologize that it's a little warm in here. We have two people online. Dr. Schab and Dr. Brenner are both online, so they're joining us via the telephone. Let's move on to item 2, which is approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion and a second? Motion by Mr. Carpenter, second by Mr. Douthit. Any questions or concerns about the agenda? See none, assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Opposed, same sign. Yeah. And Mr. Douthit, you wanted to make a statement, and I apologize. I forgot before that first vote.
No, that's fine, Dr. Lund. Having been a teacher, I'm going to have a little lesson for everybody that I learned last night. When you eat food, make sure you chew it properly and ingest it properly. I had a little incident last night, and it caused me to have some anesthesia this morning. And when the doctor met with him, he post the work, shared with me he didn't want me to do any work. I explained to him that I had a board meeting tonight. He suggested I not eat, drive, or vote. So this evening, I am not going to be voting yes or no on items, and it's because his suggestion about the anesthesia could have an extended wear, which may explain some of the other things that may happen by me this evening. However, quite honestly, he did ask me not to vote, so I won't be voting.
Thank you for that. Let's move on to item 3, which is approval of the minutes. We have the May 23rd minutes, the electronic pages 2 through 7. Do we have any additions or corrections? I had one little one on, it'll be on electronic page 3 under, it says appointment of South Middle School Associate Principal. It should be just appointment of South Middle School Principal, so just cross off the associate. Any other additions or corrections? Seeing none, do we have a motion and a second? We have a motion by Doug. Do we have a second? Nobody wants to make eye contact. Bill? Bill? Assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye. 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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. That's not working. Let's move on to item 4, which is public comments. We are about to convene into the public comment period of our meeting. Although state law does not require us to hold a public comment period, we have chosen to do so as a board because we believe it is crucial for us to hear from our community members about their concerns and issues. Having said that, please note that the board is here to listen. The public comment period is not designed to be a discussion. Accordingly, please do not expect the board to respond to your concerns or questions. This is because we take your concerns and questions seriously, and we want to have sufficient time to process and research issues if need be. We will, however, respond to your questions and concerns at a future meeting or have the proper staff get back to you at the appropriate time. I also want to point out that under state and federal privacy laws, we are unable to entertain comments or questions about school personnel. Please know, however, we take school personnel concerns very seriously. On these matters, we would ask you to go through the appropriate administrative channels. Finally, I want to remind everyone, especially tonight, because I'm not sure we're going to have time to go through all the comments. I want to remind everyone that you can always submit written comments to the board in lieu of speaking during the public comment period if you so choose. In fact, a lot of us appreciate that because then we can go back and study your emails. So if we don't have time to get to you, or in the future, any other time you want to reach out to us, feel free to reach out to us. All of our email addresses are on the Grand Forks Public Schools website. Each individual speaker will allow up to 3 minutes, and we want to enforce that because, again, we want as many people to speak that want to speak as possible, but we have a very full agenda tonight, and we may not be able to get to every one of you. And again, if we don't get to you, please send us your comments. The first one we have online, and if you could just come up to the microphone when I call your name, and I apologize in advance if I don't pronounce your names right because I'm not very good. Sarah Galbraith.
Hear me okay? All right. My name is Sarah Galbraith, and I'm a resident of Grand Forks. I'm present today to thank you for passing the transgender and gender nonconforming students policies and to show our support for our school board. To give you some background on myself, I am straight. That means I'm attracted to my opposite gender. I am cisgender. That means my sex assigned at birth matches my gender identity. These basic facts make me very much the same as the ones that have issued propaganda and have emailed to dissolve these policies for our youth. What makes me different is I am a parent, a community leader, and a community member that knows and cares for LGBTQIA Two-Spirit Plus members because it is an honor to be a part of this diverse and supportive community. My entire part of being a parent and safe space is not to be perfect, but to be present for my children and my community. Growing up, I was not given the ability to question these ideas of gender norm and construct until I came to college. In grade school and high school, I had many friends who questioned their sexuality and identity, and they were met with constant bullying and fear. That bullying and torment usually ended up with ripped clothes, stolen items, and swollen bruises because these kids were used as punching bags by the kids that were taught these students were less than and unprotected. The kids that were beat on wouldn't go to teacher or higher-ups because the parents were usually seen as a not safe space, including the teachers and higher-ups in the school system. In schools, both during my time and now, religion was pushed as to how we can continue to save our society from others that were deemed by certain adults to be unworthy of this religious love. The spoiler alert is if you have only one debate of religion, the entire backbone is an opinion of being against our queer youth and is not actually religious doctrine. We've learned historically and presently that social media is a streamlined way to make an entire population an enemy. You use fear or downright lies to make others not trust them. Unregulated facts have become truth to those that want to believe it. When our transgender and non-binary students asked for a safe space to utilize facilities, there were those that laughed at this, and then there was, of course, the litter box propaganda that was thrown and prove again that gaslighting works better than facts. The real facts include 73.7% of North Dakota school districts have a policy to use preferred name and pronoun, making Grand Forks the majority in this decision. And wanting to rescind this would be the minority thought. The fact that 59.6% of these students experience bullying on school property, and even 8.7% of students that identify as straight were bullied just on the assumption alone that they are queer youth. In queer youth in general, there is a 222% more likely to consider the attempting of suicide and 354% more likely to attempt suicide than straight youth.
Sarah, your 3 minutes are up, but if you could just wrap it up.
I will
please.
wrap up. That's not a
Respect the
problem.
other speakers. Thank you.
Again, what we can continue to do and what you have already done is we already know that to save these queer youth and to save the lives of these queer youth, all they need is one safe space in an adult and in a system. We will have a 40% chance of saving them. So thank you again for supporting these policies, and we're here to show support for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. And poor Sarah, I forgot to mention to her and for future speakers, there's a timer over on the side on the left there, so you can kind of keep track. So sorry about that, Sarah. Next one
Not a
is
problem.
Nora Van Looy.
Hello, my name is Nora. I am a 14-year-old student in Grand Forks Public Schools, and I am speaking in support of the transgender policy that was passed by the school board. I was pleasantly surprised when I read the procedure, as this kind of inclusivity is highly important, yet dishearteningly uncommon in this day and age. Research by the Trevor Project concludes that nearly half of all LGBTQ plus youth have seriously considered suicide at least once in the past year, and 20% of transgender youth attempt suicide at least once in their lives. This rate is even higher among LGBTQ youth of color. 60% of all LGBTQ youth in the United States say that they live in a home that is unaccepting of their sexuality or gender identity, and 40% state that they live in a community that is unaccepting of their sexuality or gender identity. However, this measure taken by the Grand Forks School Board has brought me hope, and every step towards equality, no matter how small, is a step in the right direction. This world is such a hateful and unsafe place that seeing measures being taken to protect those at risk is reassuring and restores my faith in my community. A policy like this makes school a safer place for many students in the Grand Forks Public School District. We need to stop stigmatizing transgender and gender nonconforming people and accept that they are not strange and bad. The situation is just different, and thus requires a different approach. This policy takes that approach and gives transgender and gender nonconforming youth the privacy and rights they deserve. It's important to remember that transgender people are humans too, and that trans rights are human rights. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Nora. Next one is Brooke Van Loy.
Hello, my name is Brooke Van Loy. I am a teacher in the district and the parent of children in the district. I support the Grand Forks Public Schools transgender policy because I care about the mental health of children in this community. Students who are denied the ability to express their true gender identity experience high rates of mental and emotional distress, leading a frighteningly high percentage of transgender students to consider and attempt suicide. Fortunately, this distress can be significantly reduced by accepting students as they wish to identify. Research published in both the Journal of Adolescent Health and Pediatrics, which is the Journal of the American Academy of Pediatrics, supports this statement. The more contexts that affirm a student's gender identity, the better the mental health outcomes are for that student. A survey conducted by the Trevor Project in 2021 found that 60% of LGBTQ+ youth report living in homes that do not affirm their identities. For those students, schools can be a safe haven where a student's identity is accepted and respected. This literally saves lives. I know that you know all of this, which is why you created this policy in the first place. I'm here tonight to let you know that your work on this topic is valued and appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Brooke. Next is Raquel Smith.
Hi, I've spoken before as a missionary kid and someone who grew up in Grand Forks that was bullied. I'm coming to you for a different aspect today. So as of 5 months ago, I am now a paraprofessional working in the grade schools here in town. And I've had two very different experiences that prove that a teacher or someone in the schools that treats all kids, no matter race, color, creed, sexual orientation, whatever, make the difference. I was in the class and there was a very new teacher. It was her first time teaching this year. She has since quit. And didn't know how to handle any bullying. One of the girls in the class was very bullying. She made fun of a girl for saying that she didn't want to be a girl or a boy, saying that they were liked both girls and boys. In one gym class, screamed out, "That's so gay," and threw a baseball at her. None of the teachers knew how to handle it. The teacher was freaked out. I'm the only one that stepped up, pulled her aside, and told her why it was wrong. After that, not only did she apologize, but since then has changed her attitude. That's all it took. And about 2 weeks ago, I had an experience that changed my entire opinion on the school. I am now working in the summer program, which one of the teachers, Ms. Kwame, teaches art and STEM. And in the art class, all they were told was get into groups and make an ocean animal, whatever you want, be yourself, be whoever you want to be. She encourages them to be themselves. A group of 4 kids from very different backgrounds got together and made a pink, white, and blue starfish because they had seen a trans flag sticker on my car. And when I went over afterwards and said, "Is this a boy or girl?" and they said, "It's a boy. His name is Tammy. And he loves disco dancing and he's covered in glitter." When I was in school, they would have gotten bullied for that and harassed nonstop. This teacher not only encouraged them, but every other kid in that class stepped up, jumped in, and wanted to have a disco dancing party with Tammy because he was amazing. If the kids can accept this about each other and can just be open and honest to be themselves, I don't understand why the adults can't keep doing it.
Thank you. Next is Leah Hirsch.
Hi, I just wanted to speak to you today a little bit about the policy and why it's so important that we keep it. I know that you all know that this is super important as you are the ones who have passed it. But I want you to know that the work that you're doing here is valued. I want our children in Grand Forks to be happy, healthy, and alive. A lot of LGBT youth in the schools are bullied. And that's a fact. I've heard it firsthand from kids. In North Dakota, 47% of LGBT youth have seriously considered ending their lives, and 29.4% attempted to end their lives because of the bullying that goes on in the schools. It's so important that we protect those kids. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Next is Mark Williamson.
Thank you. I believe I will be in the minority here. I'm here to explain how the Grand Forks transgender policy is wrong on 3 levels. First, transgenderism's main premise, that a man can really become a woman, or a woman really can become a man, is false. The best biology, psychology, and philosophy support sex as a bodily reality and gender as a social manifestation of biological sex. Focusing on biology. Reading a biological textbook will tell you that the presence of the Y chromosome determines maleness and the absence determines femaleness. The human body is sexed down to the molecular level. No amount of clothing, acting, hormones, or even surgery will or can change that fact. When a human's perceived sex in the mind does not match the body sex, this is a problem, typically called gender dysphoria. Both sides of the debate agree on this, that this is a problem. However, the activist stance that the body should be fixed to match the mind goes against biological reality. People with gender dysphoria are really suffering and really need our help. Denying biology is not helpful. That brings me to my second point. Even if we allow adults to pursue life as opposite sex, we should not be pushing transgender ideology on children. Children are not developmentally capable of consenting to life-altering decisions. Young children cannot distinguish between the reality of Santa Claus and the postman, yet somehow they are infallibly right about gender. Furthermore, encouraging social transition strongly leads to further transitions, chemical and surgical, with high costs, high complication rates, and no clear long-term psychological benefits. And, as pro-transition advocates often point out, suicidality is shockingly high in people who identify as transgender. But for children that suffer from gender dysphoria who are not encouraged to transition, 80 to 95% grow out of their dysphoria naturally. Why then is the supposed compassionate response to affirm them in their trans identity a group with the highest suicidality rate of all demographics? Now to my third point. Even if transgenderism was true and both acceptable and safe to promote to children, hiding the fact from parents and forcing teachers to lie to parents and students is wrong. Quoting from the policy, school staff should not disclose any information that may reveal a student's transgender status to others, including parents or guardians. Just so. To close, children who suffer from gender dysphoria and related conditions need our help. This policy is not that help. This policy is a lie. You teach children a lie, and you force teachers to lie. The point of education is to conform our minds to truth, not a lie. I suggest you serve the truth. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Greta Gabrielson.
Good evening, Dr. Brenner and members of the Grand Forks Public School Board. My name is Greta Gabrielson, and I am your target demographic. Target. It's a strange choice of words, isn't it? My children have attended and are currently attending Grand Forks Public Schools for their secondary educations. My oldest went through the entirety of his education with no policies in place to protect his gender identity. He is now thriving as an adult in Grand Forks. Just as he did as a child, but not without challenges, hurdles, and roadblocks When my oldest attended Grand Forks Central prior to his freshman year, we had meetings set up with administration to discuss gender inclusion, as I am unfortunately aware of the hatred, bigotry, and transphobia prevalent not only in society as a whole, but within this community and even in this very room. Throughout my oldest child's schooling, we continue to have meetings due to the lack of policy and procedure being in place and accessible for all administration, support staff, and students. The installation of FDIAR has created a greater opportunity for acceptance and ability of self-preservation for the students that it is meant to assist. I am a parent with multiple transgender or non-binary students in the Grand Forks public school system. I've seen what life is like prior to FDIAR's installation and now how it has benefited my currently enrolled students. Moments ago, I claimed to be the target demographic. That's not simply so. In fact, that's not a truth. My children are the target. I am their shield. I asked permission for my children to speak in front of you tonight. I know what some of you are thinking. It's very odd to ask children for permission to speak as an adult. However, as you have heard, there is so much hate and bigotry that it can quite literally be dangerous for me to out my children simply by standing here in front of you. I lost power, but I'm loud. We're good. I'd like to speak about two different occurrences this year regarding my children and how they are directly benefiting and maintaining engagement, thanks in part to FDIAR. My middle school was misgendered in a completely unacceptable way by a teacher. Staff sought quick and thorough correction. That teacher sought retirement this year, but prior to that, in the meeting with the principal, social worker, and instructor, he admitted his ignorance to the transgender community and the reality they face. He asked not only for grace, but he promised to do better. No parent wants to hear, "Mom, he and people like him are the reason I want to kill myself." Now that FDIAR has entered the classroom, students and their parents are allowed to have a meeting to promote that gender inclusivity. This past March, I received a call from admin at my child's school. Ms. Gabrielson, we would love to meet with you and your spouse to discuss how we can help your child excel. That changed my world. Implementation was swift and thorough. Dr. Brenner and the board, thank you for hearing how this simple policy has enhanced the lives of my children, as well as the children in the transgender community. To the children and parents listening from their safe spaces, I see you, I hear you, I will fight for you. Thank you, school board, for being their shield.
Thank you. Next is Jason Estes.
Hi, my name is Jason Estes. I am a proud parent of an LGBT child who is transgender. I just want to have just a couple of quick comments. I'm going to be really short. I'd like to speak in support of the school board's transgender policy. I got quick notes here. I'm sorry, my phone is messed up on me a little bit. In the world, someone here also spoke about this, about the fact that there is only two genders. But that is not exactly true. Genetically speaking, we have intersex people. It's estimated that 1.7% of people in the United States have some form of intersex traits, which is most people identify the XY and XX, but there's also XXY and a bunch of others. Out of that 1.7%, about 0.5% actually shows visible signs of that kind of traits. And in the world, it's estimated that 1 in 4 people actually have those kind of genetic markers. So physically speaking, there are more than just 2 genders. It's just we only visibly see generally 2. I'm done.
Thank you. Charles Vondel.
Hello, my name is Charles Vondel. I'm not only here as a resident of Grand Forks, but I also went through the school system. I now actually have a nephew in the system, and I want to thank you for the support of the policy. Although I've been out of school for over 6 years now, I miss some of the teachers. I wish I had this policy when I was coming out in high school. I still remember not feeling welcome to be able to use any of the bathrooms. I had to hike down 6 flights of steps just to be able to use an inclusive bathroom in the basement of the high school. One should not have to do that. And not only that, think of the effects it has on one's health. I know some might say that trans adults and youth are most likely to commit suicide due to transitioning. But the truth is, some of those reasons is that they either don't have a support system, they're rejected by friends, family, classmates, or they're discriminated against. But they don't have a support. But with this policy, it will and has helped build a support for those kids in this town. So I thank you again for this policy.
Thank you. And thank you all for your respect tonight, and thank you for your respect for the time. We were able to get through all the people that wanted to speak because of the respect you showed, so appreciate that. Let's move on to item 5, which is superintendent's recommendations for discussion. 5A is review of school board meeting norms on electronic page 8. Mr. Douthit.
Thank you, Dr. Lunn. Be prepared, be on time, value and respect each other, exercise thoughtful deliberation and conversation, be professional at the board table and when visiting with the general public, speak up when the norms are not being followed, and advocate on behalf of students and keeping the community in mind. And then I'll address governance since that's part of our review this evening. Lead by policy, serve as advocates for K-12 public education, entrust the day-to-day operations to the professionals, let the administrators do their work, assist community members and stakeholders in following the chain of command.
Thank you. And just a note to the public, we appreciate all of you. If you want to stay the whole night, you sure can. I also realize it's warmer in here than it is outside, and if you feel like you want to go, feel free. We don't lock you in here. You can go whenever you want, but if you want to stay, please feel free to stay. Thank you. Let's move on to item 5B for discussion, the DODEA grant update by Tanya Sliker, our Fund Development and Grants Coordinator. Tanya, thank you for being here.
Good evening, President Lunn, members of the school board. It is my pleasure to provide to you tonight an update on our project Heroes Power grant at Nathan Twining Elementary and Middle School. Okay. Nathan Twining School received an FY20 DODEA grant for Project Heroes Power. This grant focuses on supporting the academic success of Twining students in the area of STEM, focusing on raising math and science scores. The DODEA grant is a 5-year grant totaling $500,000. The first year of the grant, which is October 2020 through September of 2021, focuses on our planning year. During this year, we spent this time providing teachers and staff development in Project Lead the Way and developing our STEM lab for STEM enrichment activities. This school year, which runs October 2021 through September of 2022, was our implementation year. Teachers began incorporating their Project Lead the Way training into their lesson plans, and students had the opportunity to explore the STEM lab. The STEM lab concept was so successful, Twining will be setting up a second lab within the school. The remaining years of the grant, we will continue to provide professional development for teachers in Project Lead the Way, and we will also be expanding our after-school robotics clubs. Grant goals. So as with most grants, as we know, we have goals and we have outcomes that we need to track. Our data tracks the improvement of science achievement in our 4th and 8th grade students by measuring any of the following measures: state science standards, which we'll report out here in a few minutes, local science assessment, attitude inventory, enrollment in science activities, grades in science, and participation in science extracurriculars. Our stated measurements changed this last March to reflect the different measuring opportunities, and this was a request of DODEA, and this was due to the academic decline across the country due to COVID. So from our original grant tracking, they asked us to now track these. And once Elizabeth goes into some of the data, you'll kind of see why. But it just gives us more flexibility in reporting exactly what our projects are doing. So what does this grant do for us, this $500,000? This funding provides Twining with a great opportunity to expand teacher professional development, purchase classroom equipment, provide for a dedicated STEM lab, and hire additional support through a STEM coordinator. We also purchase other STEM-related supplies, and we've hired an external evaluator to conduct analysis on our achievements. We hired Goshen Education Consulting as our external evaluator. The year one annual evaluation is attached in your agenda packet starting on page 10. So you'll see those 5 pages will kind of really explain what he's dug into on our data. I'm now going to turn it over to Elizabeth, our instructional design coach, and really the lead on this project, to dig into a little bit on that teacher and student data.
Hi. As you can see in the first year of our measurement of our NDSA scores, we were 67% proficient in our 4th grade, and our goal was 61%. And in 8th grade, we were 83% proficient, and our goal was 59%. And then last fall, we trained 11 teachers in Project Lead the Way, and this was a survey that they took after that training. And as you can see, our teachers were ready for STEM professional development. And then what sticks out here is that 22% of our teachers were confident teaching STEM concepts to their students. And then if you look down where we're at a 4, it says my students enjoy STEM aspects of my class. So even though the students enjoyed it, the teachers weren't confident in teaching it prior to implementation. And with this grant, we implemented a rubric which included the engineering design process and the 5 C's, we call them. So before doing each module, we went through these with students, and at the conclusion of the module, teachers graded students or measured students, not grade, measured students in each of these areas. And 11% were rated as advanced. And then I guess what sticks out here in the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, the students were measured as fundamental, and then in our first year, we had 42% in 5th grade. And then we also, with our grant, we were able to have a STEM day at Twining. So we had a team of teachers that were able to work outside of the contract, preparing lessons for teachers to do prior to the STEM days. So teachers went over these concepts, and then they just showed up, and all the activities were ready for them. We reached out to the school, our base liaison officer, and contacted community members from the base. We had parents and even airmen that had no students in our school that showed up to help support our STEM day at Twining. We did it with Purple Up, the month of the military child. Next year we'll do it on E-Week. I guess I didn't know there was an engineering week, so we'll move that activity to engineering week and do more activities. So it was a big success. We had a lot of parents in the building. Kids were really excited. We were going over some of the activities with the parents prior to starting, and we had scaffolds for parents explaining that they were going to be doing a non-Newtonian fluid, and one of the parents said, "Oh, that's what that is. My student came home and said we were going to be making non-Newtonian fluid." So they were really excited and kind of educating our parents too, I guess. So.
And I'll kind of finish up here. So one of the unique opportunities that has come from this DODEA grant is our partnership with Goshen Education Consulting. That's our external evaluator. They wrote their own grant, a $2.7 million grant. It's a Department of Defense grant to provide funding to military-connected communities to provide a week-long STEM camp. We are lucky to be chosen as one of 10 of those communities to bring STEM camp. So as you can see, it'll be summer of 2021, which we did last summer, this summer 2022, which is space-themed, and then summer of 2023. This is fully funded by Goshen Education Consulting. So we have a small registration fee, but everything else is paid for with this grant. Without being part of the DODEA camp, we would not have been able to receive the STEM camp. We had an overwhelming success for our first year of STEM camp. We had 125 students, and within 8 minutes of opening it up, we had to close it. It was that successful. It was a wonderful, wonderful opportunity. It just kind of shows the desire of our community, our parents, and our students to really dive into these STEM activities. So we are moving into September of 2022. We have moved the camp. It will be at South Middle School this year, the week of August 15th through the 19th. And so we'll be opening up that registration to all community members here in the next week or two. So on behalf of Nathan Twining Elementary and Middle School teachers and students, I just want to thank you for this time tonight to hear about our Project Heroes Paro and open it up to you guys for any questions that you might have of Elizabeth and I on the grant, STEM days, STEM camp.
Cynthia, do you have any clarifying questions or comments from Netherland?
I do. Actually, I have one. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I have one question, and it's a little bit harder because the YouTube is delayed, but I'm watching and I'm listening. So page 10 of 210 of our electronic packet, I wanted to ask, on that it says 100% of teachers agreed. Oh, I don't have that in front of me right now. So here's my question. Were you pleased with the finding that 20% of teachers incorporated engineering design as a result of that training? Was that a good outcome, 20%?
So the 22% was prior to implementing STEM activities at Twining.
So I think the thing to remember about our DODEA grant, and the thing that is unique about this grant is it's 5 years. We have all of the money up front, and so you're planning, you're implementing, but then you have 3 more years to continue seeing that growth. So at the bottom end where some of these numbers are, that should be expected, and we should expect them to continue growing up as our teachers learn more, they incorporate more, and the students learn that this is part of their everyday education. So
we weren't pleased with it.
Well, we weren't pleased, but it would be expected. And so, the external evaluator wasn't surprised at the results, and so we'll just keep moving forward. We have different measurements that we'll be measuring, and those results should be coming out here towards September, which would be the end of year 2, which is the implementation year. So,
Does that answer your question? Thanks, Cynthia.
Yes, thank you.
Any other board members have any clarifying questions or comments? Mr. Douthit?
Thank you. So you said there were 125 for the summer camp, and there's a minimal fee. So every family has an equal opportunity to enroll, and if you're number 126, you're out. It's not based on, it's if you get in, and that's that, correct? Or is there a process that weeds, or is, just go explain that. With.
Great question. So this is a military-connected community grant. So the first focus is on our active military or military-connected students. So anyone from Twining or students whose parents are working on the Air Force Base, we take them in first. So once we hit a minimum of 40%, then we would start looking at our students of color and our female students. Once I have all of those in, if we have any spots left, then we open it up to the community. And so that was the order that we look at when we're accepting our applications.
Okay, thank you. That comes from the Department of Defense, correct?
That actually was written into Goshen Education Consulting's grant, is how that was going to work.
Which is approved through the Department of Defense.
Correct.
Okay. And then the second question, and Tanya, this is directed at you. How many schools applied to be one of these schools? How many applied to be one of these schools for the $500,000, and how many were selected?
Well, there's over 20, and just due to our relationship with Goshen and those external evaluators and how closely we were able to work when writing our FY20 grant, they chose to bring us on because they believed that we could handle it. And they also have worked with us. We actually wrote a FY22 grant, which we'll be waiting to hear on here in September if we receive that grant. So it's just a great partnership.
Thank you, and I was just going to say the relationship with Twining, with the Twining just absolutely builds into that. So the relationship this community has with the base is strong and it just has to continue. And this is something that will assure the longevity and the legacy. So thank you both for all the work that you've done. There's a lot of hidden hours, I'm certain. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further clarifying questions or comments? Go ahead, Shannon.
So is Goshen primarily like a military-based company, like that they have this tie to the military base, or was this just a grant opportunity for them to kind of test curriculum?
They are an external evaluator that does really focus on military grants. They work with a lot of these DODEA grants. They just have that expertise. It's a unique way of writing. It's a unique way of understanding the grant requirements, and so that's kind of been their niche. So when we met up with them, they sought us out because we are 100% military base. And so I went to a training with them down in Kansas City, helped us write our FY20 grant, and the partnership has just grown from there, so.
Yeah, my reason for asking is I think when you take a step back and look at our community, I mean, especially in light of having an Air Force base, we have a lot of engineers on campus, a really strong engineering school as well as aeronautics, and then you have commercial businesses here in the community that have a lot of need for engineers and STEM-based fields. And so, STEM camp and something like that being so small, I just see an opportunity for expansion like you experienced 8 minutes and you're having to shut down any applications. So I just wonder if in the future there's an opportunity for the district, and maybe through public-private partnerships or something like that with the university and with some other commercial businesses, you could roll something out like this to a broader community base. But
yeah, that actually is kind of part of the continuation of this after the third year. It's starting to work with our community members to build programmatically, being able to continue this on. So we went through a training trying to work out with our community members and trying to secure funding to keep this going. So there's ways for us to build off of that. So I agree that it is definitely a need and something that we're continually watching for in order to bring that community-wide, so.
yeah, and just an offer of like a way to sort of trial run it too is reaching out to some of those commercial, industry folks and seeing if you can host a STEM day at their facility with some of their people during the winter months and just opening it up to the public. I mean, you look at Aerospace Day out at, UND, and it's just crazy. And, seems like there is a real desire for that in this community. It's probably because of all the STEM-focused careers that are here, so.
Yeah, we're really excited to partner with UND Engineering this coming summer. They're actually going to be sending their doctoral students to be our lab assistants. So, and our entire field day, which is on Thursday, will be at UND Engineering, and they're going to be developing all the different activities for the kids. So it'll be really exciting to partner with UND Engineering and trying to expand that relationship that way. And our doctoral students are going to be very excited to work with all the kids, so.
Any other clarifying questions or comments? See none. Thanks both of you. Look forward to hearing again next year the further adventures. Let's move on to item 5C under discussion, self-assessment committee report. It's on electronic pages 15 through 25. Chris.
Thank you, Dr. Lunn. As you know, we did the self-assessment. The report is in front of us, and what I would ask is that we would review it by the 3 areas of norms, governance, and other. So what I will do is I will open it up for discussion first under Category 1, meeting norms. Any thoughts, comments, questions? Hearing none, we will go to governance. Hearing none, we will go to other. And one final request, if there's any comments. Yes, Dr. Lund.
I mean, the only comment I would have is and we can look at this next year, is we didn't we only got six responses, and I don't know if it was because we had a kind of a compacted time frame and stuff like that, and maybe next year we should look at having a little longer time frame because I think this is critical. I mean, how do we get better if we don't do self-assessments? That's the only comment I have.
Thank you, Dr. Lund.
I had a comment. This is Cynthia.
Go ahead, we can hear you well.
Sorry, I wasn't fast enough on my phone.
Oh, I'm sorry, Cynthia.
With regards to the board members speaking up when the norms are not being followed, I wanted to say that I've gotten a couple of comments from more than one teacher about the need for us to make sure that the public is not beating up our administrators at the meetings. And I do think that that is part of us following board norms, to be respectful. And so, I mean, I know that I really appreciate those who have served on the board, and we're going to have a new board, but I think that that is something that we probably will want to talk about in the future. I just thought it was important for me to share that there's been a few teachers in particular who have reached out to me independently and just talked about the fact of the norms not necessarily being followed with regards to administrators.
Thank you. Ms. Hazzard.
I think it might be worth too. I know we evaluate the board as a whole, but I think it would probably, I agree with the longer time frame. I had taken a week off and completely missed this. But I think it would do me well to evaluate myself as well, and just to be reflective of my own piece of it, even if it's something that we do without, I don't know. I don't know how that happens or what that looks like, but I think it would be a helpful tool for me to do that.
Thank you. I agree. Self-reflection is a very strong tool.
And there are lots of board self-reflection tools out there, and I think we can, next school year, we can look into that, and I agree completely.
And thank you, Cynthia, for your comment. I think of sometimes perhaps where I remained quiet when perhaps I should have made a statement where I think a norm wasn't being followed, and I think part of that I only speak for myself, is we're trying to be nice to one another, and I think we can be nice while also addressing an item or an issue that needs to be addressed. So for that, I certainly respect what you provided us. So thank you all for your feedback. I apologize. Amber, I'm sorry, I didn't see that.
It's okay.
I can blame that on something, I'm sure.
I think one of the things that we talked about during our self-assessment meeting too is with having an election and new board members potentially coming on as well, that we have an opportunity to really go through what our goals are and setting those norms, but also talking about how we can do those things. If, I think sometimes people get stuck in like, well, the president can speak of the board, or I shouldn't intervene. And so working through some of those like how-tos of just like, if you have a point of order or something to say, or you think the norms are not being followed, I think we can do a better job of just guiding the hows of that. And so we did have that conversation at our meeting as we reflect on the assessment. How do we communicate the assessment to people from the beginning so we know what the expectations are, and then show them how-tos as well.
Thank you. And are there any other comments? Dr. Lund.
Well, just one other comment about that. I know in the past, Dr. Brenner and previous superintendents have had orientation for new board members, and we know we're going to have at least 3 new board members, and I'm assuming Dr. Brenner will be meeting with them in June or early July and do an orientation session and including all of this stuff. So just so you're aware of that.
Thank you, Dr. Lund. Are there any other comments? Thank you all.
Thanks, Chris. Let's move on to item 6, which is superintendent's recommendations for action. 6A is the consent agenda on pages 16 through 39. Do I have a motion and a second for the consent agenda? We have a motion by Bill. Do we have a second? Second by Jeff. Assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Sorry, motion carries. Let's move on to item 6B, which is the Head Start third year of 5-year continuation grant carryover. Tracy Johnson, our Director of Head Start, is here. Thank you, Tracy.
Yes, hello.
It's-
Are you
it's a
guys
li-
sick of seeing me?
No, it's electronic pages 40 through 51 for board members.
Thank you. We have a couple projects going on at Head Start right now, and because of the pandemic and some shipping issues, they cannot guarantee that those projects will be completed by the end of this fiscal year. So that is why I'm asking for a carryover of $58,203 to be carried to our next fiscal year. And that's simply to have these funds that have already been obligated so we can continue to work through the summer months through the end of this fiscal year to complete those projects. One project is to put some new cabinets in a classroom that we are adding at Ben Franklin Elementary School. And the other project is to update existing structures on our playground. And that was a grant that you had already approved once. Now I guess I'm asking you to approve that kind of again, to carry that over. I was told by Dakota Playland that those two pieces of equipment won't be shipped until October. And then depending on our winter, when that's gonna start, I can't guarantee that will be finished.
So
And then in addition, I'm asking for that carryover amount, the non-federal share of $58,203 is $14,551. And I'm asking for that to be waived as well.
And Tracy, can that be in one motion, or do you want two separate motions?
It can be in one motion.
Board questions or comments? Cynthia, have any questions?
No, I'm good.
Thank you. Do we have a motion and a second for those items? Moved by Doug. Do we have a second? Second by Shannon. So the motion is to carry over the $58,203 from the third year of the 5-year continuation grant to the fourth year, and then also the non-federal share waiver amount of $14,551. Assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you.
Let's move on to item 6C, which is policy review, which is on electronic pages 52 through 59. Mr. Douthit.
Thank you again, Dr. Lunn. What we have in front of us are two policies. Second reads, community use of district property and school district organization plan. Unless I hear different, I would like to make a single motion for these two. Okay. Hearing none, what I would like to do is make a motion that we accept to complete the second reading as written and adoption as an official policy of the district for the following policies, ABBB and ABAA. And in that motion, I would like you to refer to page 56 of the page 210, and the last line of the first paragraph, I would amend to say, shall provide for grades 6 through 8, semicolon. So we would change the 5 to a 6. So that would be added to the motion.
So we have a motion. Do we have a second? Second by Bill. Any clarifying questions from board members? Seeing none, assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Back to you, Mr. Douthit.
Thank you, Dr. London. The second motion is to rescind policies 7210 and 7220 because they've been replaced.
Do we have a second for those rescindments? We have a second by Jackie. Any clarifying questions? Seeing none, assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Thank you, Chris. Let's move on to item 6D, which is appointment of Valley Middle School principal. It's on electronic pages 60 through 84, and we have Lindsay Stostad, our Human Resources Director here. Thank you, Lindsay.
Good evening, President Lund and members of the school board. On what you have before you is a recommendation for appointment of the Valley Middle School principal. On May 26th, we held interviews for this position. We also held a second round of interviews on that Friday. And I'm just reading down the memo. And what came of those interviews is the recommendation to appoint Dr. Vandal, who is currently our assistant principal of Lake Agassiz Elementary School. He comes with great background in instructional leadership, teaching and learning, as well as PLC work, and is data-driven and student-driven in decision-making. The administrative recommendation is to appoint Dr. Vandal's hiring at a salary of $120,358 in total, effective July 1, 2022.
Clarifying questions, comments from board members? Go ahead, Jackie.
I just wanted to make a comment about really appreciating the packet that we're getting for these
Good.
individuals now. It's really nice for me to be able to see, you know, their cover letters or letters of recommendation, their resumes. That's really nice. So thank you for that.
Cynthia, do you have any questions at all?
No, I don't, but I agree with Jackie's comment.
Okay. So the recommendation is to approve Dr. Vandal as the new principal at Valley Middle School. Do we have a motion and a second? We have a motion by Jackie. Do we have a second? Second by Jeff. Assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries. Let's move on to item 6E, which is appointment of Ben Franklin Elementary School Principal, electronic pages 85 through 100. Lindsay.
President Lund and members of the school board, what you have in front of you is the appointment of the Ben Franklin Elementary School principal. We held interviews on Wednesday, June 1st. We would like to recommend Mr. Joshua Myatt for the position, effective July 1. He is currently the principal in Fisher's Elementary School in Minnesota. The interview team was led by Dr. Lewis, including 17 staff, as well as myself. Some of the features that Mr. Myatt will bring, he's approachable, student-centered, seeks out community and family involvement, and works to ensure that students are successful. The administrative recommendation is to appoint Mr. Myatt's hiring at a salary of $108,854 annually.
Clarifying questions or comments? I'm going to ask kind of an off-the-wall question, and just in general for you. So I noticed on this interview team there were parents involved.
Yes.
And I liked that. I'd like to see that a little more often. I realize some positions they aren't, but what's your HR philosophy about including one of our important stakeholders at the table?
We did that both for Ben Franklin as well as Valley. I think in my human resource opinion, it's very important that we have that input and we have that feedback and that collaboration and that observation from that perspective. It adds a lot of value to the interview process, and it's important to gather that feedback from a parent perspective.
Thank you. Any other clarifying questions? If not, the recommendation is to approve the appointment for the Ben Franklin Elementary School principal. Do we have a motion and a second? Motion by Bill. Do we have a second? Second by Jackie. Any final questions? Assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Lastly, before we move on to the Brandon show, 6F is appointment of Century Elementary School Associate Principal on pages 101 through 114. Lindsay.
Yes, President Lund, members of the board. This is the recommendation to appoint Century Elementary School's Associate Principal, who interviews were held Monday, June 6th, and the recommendation is to appoint Mrs. Chelsea Banky for this position effective July 1. Currently, Mrs. Banky is serving in the role of elementary literacy coordinator with our school district, and she comes to us with a Bachelor in Science in Elementary Education and a Master's in Education from UND, as well as a provisional administrative license as she pursues her administrative credential from the Minnesota State University of Moorhead. The interview team was led by Dr. Saxberg, along with 5 teacher representatives listed in the areas on the memo, and then Mrs. Banky emerged as the candidate of choice as her experiences directly aligned with Century Elementary School's goals and needs. The feedback that was given from this, where she excelled in leadership areas such as communication skills, instructional leadership, relationships, organizational management, and the salary recommended for Ms. Banky's hiring would be $84,336.
Clarifying questions or comments from board members? Cynthia, you have any questions or comments?
Nope, I can make a motion.
Go for it.
I'll make a motion to approve Mrs. Benke at Century Elementary School.
Do we have a second for that? Second by Jeff. Assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Thank you, Lindsay. Let's move on to item 6G, which is a general fund financial statement, electronic pages 115 through 125. Now we start the Brandon Baumbach Business Manager meeting hour, the variety show.
Variety show.
Thank you.
President Lund, members of the board, I appreciate the opportunity to take so much time on the agenda here. I just wanted to give you a little navigation for a few of these items. This first one is just going to be based in the packet, and then there'll be a presentation that'll be above you that will be taking the next couple of items wrapped into this same agenda item. I'll draw your attention maybe when you want to move or don't want to move, because we don't want to, for the first few slides, you may not want to move at all. So I just wanted to start off with first a update here for the first 11 months of the fiscal year 21-22 as we draw to a close. General fund revenues were $102,000, where those general fund expenditures are at 102 million and 95.5 million. So the excess of 6.4 million of revenues over expenditures is where we sit today. It's just a little bit misleading at the moment because there's still a number of variables that are going to come out here. So to highlight those, on page 116, you can see the summary of those revenues and expenditures with more detail to follow. When you look at the local sources, you know, plus or minus, those are coming in where we would expect them to be. It's showing you about 83% of those revenues have come in. There's some items of how districts cross lines with tuition that are still coming in, whereas the state line, that's relatively stable. Almost 98% is where we're going to be on that expectation. And those federal sources are always slow to come in this time of year. So that confounded by the expenditure side, which you could summarize as looking like we're looking very healthy right now, but that's not yet the case. Within the salaries bucket, we always see a lot of payrolls coming out of the budget at this time of year ahead of the summer break, and those have not yet completely processed either. I will say though, all told, this is the first spreadsheet here. I mentioned page 116, the general fund statement that compares budget versus actual on the year. The second of these standard statements we provide monthly will show actual over actual from the year prior. And there we can get just a little bit more of a glimpse. So the first page of that summary or statement is 119. And here you can see, you know, total revenues when you're looking at year over year is up just slightly at 2.7%. And then the expenditures, they appear to be quite favorably down from a fiscal perspective at 13%. That is more of a timing thing. So we're tracking well on the fiscal year or wrap up of fiscal year here, and I'd say just ahead of where we were anticipated to be at this time. So it's a little confusing, but that's the status of the report at this time in the year, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Clarifying questions from board members? Utilities, is that, we had a bad winter, is inflation factored into that, or is that going to factor in more to next year?
Yeah, we see electricity in both, electricity and natural gas prices are up. I'm sure that's bad winter, but folks are warning of natural gas pricing not really normalizing in the near future. So we'll have to see how that plays out, but.
Other clarifying questions or comments from board members?
Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion, we have a second by Shannon. Further clarifying questions, Amber?
I just have a comment. I don't know if this was done before, but I noticed it for the first time, that the box you have that are numbered are next to the actual corresponding line. So I don't know if that's something that you're doing, but it's very helpful.
Yeah, I should take absolute credit, but I would commend Mr. Berge for having, starting that.
I don't
and
know if
followed
the
his lead.
text is so small that I didn't notice it before, but now I'm noticing it, so.
I think he had the numbers in a different spot, but
Yeah.
these are more prominent now, so you can take credit for that.
There we go.
Other clarifying questions or comments? See none, the motion is to approve the general fund financial statement, assuming a roll call vote. All those in favor, please state aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Let's move on to item H, which is the Finance Committee report, and I'm not going to read the rest of that. Pages 126 through 133, Brandon.
Yes, so I want to give a summary here of the Finance Committee, and I'm going to do that through the slide deck that's up on the screen. But there's two parts to the Finance Committee, really two primary agenda items that were addressed. That's the general obligation building fund bonds, update and project scope, and then into a conversation around a preliminary budget for fiscal year 22-23. The first item, I think I can summarize just verbally here, where you don't need to move to capture all of that, because there will be some good conversation around that. The information in more detail is actually going to be just on your, inside of your board packet. I also, for the first part of the conversation, Building and Grounds Director Chris Arnold's here to help kind of navigate us through a little bit of that conversation. So I'm just going to turn over to my slide here. And Cindy is busy trying to dial in our bond counsel on this conversation, so they would be available for any questions. But we'll continue to move forward as we work on that. So really, and again, I'll just narratively provide this, and you don't need to even crank your neck. There's just a little bit of a roadmap right away in our slide deck, kind of letting us know where we're going to go. And for this first part, I'm just letting you know that we're going to go to that general obligation conversation, and we're looking for tonight some direction provided to staff as to where we want to go with a couple of changing dynamics. So summary here is that September 28, 2021, the people of Grand Forks voted in support of a 10 mil levy increase that would allow what we're expecting to be an additional levy proceed of $2.5 million annually going forward. The conversation had up to this point from the board is that we would bond $1 million of that $2.5 million, therefore bringing money forward for projects right away. And the expectation was, in doing so, we would be able to get up to $16.5 million in bond proceeds. A couple things have changed since then. And by the way, the scope of that project was to address life safety projects and air quality. Now, I want to highlight here a couple of things that have changed since that time. As you recall, Schrader Middle School had a roof collapse, and we began to look at a project scope that was inclusive of repair of that roof, which we were only beginning to understand at the time, addressing drainage issues in a courtyard, and then also the path that the board eventually voted on was really a budgeted amount of $2.9 million to fully enclose that middle courtyard, adding more space for adequate teaching and learning. So that, when that was brought forward, the question was, how do we pay for that? And we looked at these dollars that were coming in, not just $2.5 million annually, but those to be bonded up front. And we said we can take from there, and from the life safety projects and air quality projects, we would just to adjust those expectations that we would get to them, but maybe not all of them right away. Other things that have changed is the interest rate environment continues to rise. Okay, Just by way of a quick introduction, so she feels welcome, we have Ann Willett from PFN Financial Advisor LLC, who has been bond counsel on this conversation. As I mentioned, she's present in case there are any questions, but I'll do the presentation here. So interest rate environments have continued to increase, and working with bond counsel, the most recent estimate was rather than deriving 16.5 million from those bond proceeds, we could expect 13.6 billion. So we have additional need for those dollars and fewer of those dollars available. And lastly, within the context of national news, we've seen likely a reaffirming of school safety priorities. It's just context for this entire conversation. So in your board packet, and I don't have the number right in front of me here of which page that's on. 128? Yes. 128. Now this up on the screen is a simplified version, but this is where we really get into the project details here. And this is where I again, Building and Grounds Director Chris Arnold will be available. We started to imagine a few different scenarios of what it looks like to, with the bond proceeds of 13.6, address those priorities. In the Finance Committee, it was reaffirmed the commitment to safety of students above all else, and so you'll see a number of these projects for mass notifications, et cetera, taking up the bulk of that spreadsheet there, being a priority reaffirmed. And then that's the top 2/3 of the spreadsheet. The bottom is where you get into Kelly, HVAC modernization, Lewis and Clark, and Wilder. That's the air quality. One of the biggest changes from prior conversations to this point is saying with the Schrader Middle School project, do we need to infill that courtyard? If we did not, if the board so chooses, we would save a great deal to be able to put back into these projects here. And that's where we come up with the far right column that would fit almost in budget of $13.6 million in proceeds, addressing the majority of these concerns by making a few of these adjustments as described here. I'm certain there'll be good conversation and questions here. And so I'll first, if it's okay, invite Chris Arnold up just to even better articulate some of the project scope.
So I think Brandon did a great job introducing the spreadsheet in front of you. Really what this does is it addresses our safety and security, and it also brings the district a lot closer to addressing urgent indoor air quality needs across the entire district. Within District 1 now, this is excluding Twining, we would have 2 schools remaining without air conditioning and poor indoor air quality levels, and that would be Schrader Middle School and Valley Middle School. And that's on that handout. It's not on Brandon's slide. And I also broke down some additional notes on the side of some things that were excluded. We did not include Valley Middle School as part of this project. We did add South Middle School back into the life safety improvements. And I broke down your cost per square foot for your mass notification, fire alarms, clocks, and public address systems. The Kelly HVAC modernization project, we are seeing unbelievable price increases in the HVAC world. I do have reservations that at I think we're right now just sitting at just a little bit north of $7.5 million. I do have concerns of completing the scope of work that is before you, but again, until we bid that package out, I really can't tell you what we can and can't afford, and we'll deal with that set of cards when we get there.
Questions by board members? I'm sure we'll have quite a few. Hang on, go ahead, Catherine.
Yeah, Mr. Arnold, thank you. I'm just curious if by chance, and I hate to even put this out there, but if by chance there's not a past referendum for Valley, is there a desire to take a look at these projects and ensure that Valley has that mass notification system implemented as well?
Yeah, I think, you know, depending on where the future takes us here in 6 months, the board will need to reaffirm the direction we want to go. Just to kind of give you maybe a play-by-play of how this will all come forward. If the board chooses to proceed with this preliminary budget, administration, Brandon and I will work with our contractors to further finalize the design work for both pieces to begin to really narrow in those dollars to see what's real. And then that will help us build some context as to what can give and what can take. I think it is extremely important if something does not happen at Valley that we do need to come back and address that system in some way, shape, or form.
Jackie.
She kind of stole my question, but I think, you know, something with recent news, you know, can you maybe just speak to the fact that there still are plans in terms of security and in terms of ensuring safety of Valley students in the interim until we get to a vote?
Yeah, so this plan is much like what we're planning for all of the buildings, including Valley, really is to modernize our buildings to allow for the quickest possible notification of not only police and response units across the city, but also internal stakeholders such as the district office, and then those folks that are located right within that building of whatever event is taking place. At Valley currently, we know that we have a very dilapidated system, and what we can do as part of this is we can have them continue a line item on their study when they come through, if this is where we want to go, and we can have them bring that forward, and depending on what the result is this fall, we can then choose to either include it or exclude it.
Chris, if we don't do the courtyard modernization, do we still not have to remove the trees and improve the drainage to that? And
Yes,
is that included somewhere
we
in
are
here?
going to have to invest into Schrader. So I've been having a lot of discussions today with our contractors, with structural engineers. There is a much larger story playing out at Schrader. As you may recall, we have WJE who is doing a structural analysis at Schrader, the entire building. They will be on site next week. I am expecting some initial feedback from them next week in my conversations with them earlier today. I will tell you there will be continuous work probably throughout that entire structure. Additionally, the classrooms that need to be repaired, there's also some structural work that needs to be completed in order to support a new roof. The existing wall that separates the classrooms from the courtyard is not able to bear the weight that is required by code upon that new roof level. So there is going to be a significant amount of investment that will be required. Now, I have not had a chance to visit with our insurance providers about this. In fact, Brandon doesn't even know about this yet because it literally was evolving this afternoon. But I can share with you that there is going to be additional costs. Our goal is to take drainage away from the courtyard, but then also bring in drainage to that space at the same time, just to hopefully make it a little bit more of a usable space for the students.
Thank you. Shannon, did you have a question?
Yeah, I think it's been kind of hit on a little bit by Chris, but it's probably helpful if you can just walk kind of through a timeline for ordering and installing a mass notification system, because I think we'll be fine. Like, it won't happen in a sequencing of events where we would order it, install it, then the referendum vote, and then we have to make a decision on Valley, right? It would be,
Right.
we're gonna figure things out, referendum vote will happen, and then probably.
Yeah, to probably help paint a timeline to your point, Shannon, we're probably looking at a 3-month design window. I think our previous meeting with one vendor in particular gave us about a 3-month design window to allow them to assess and begin to build some sort of scope. That will put us pretty much in line with where that referendum will kind of fall in at, and will allow us to move forward in whichever direction we choose to proceed.
just to wrap on that, it's not gonna cost us much of anything more just to have Valley as a line in that scope and then cut back scope, I imagine.
I suspect we're going to be cutting scope in more than one area, unfortunately.
And so I just want to offer kind of my comments at the finance committee meeting. So I was really concerned about the framework creep that would happen with renovating the entire courtyard and moving rooms around in Schrader. Not to say that it's not needed and necessary at some point, but the scope of the bonding and the, what we put forward for the bond, that scope was limited to safety and air quality, and to renovate classrooms and to, provide more teaching and learning space, while important, doesn't directly align with it. And, I think it's most important to try to get all of our buildings into a place that's safe and healthy to learn, and then work on the spacing issues and all of the other list items. So I probably pushed pretty hard for that at the finance committee meeting, and really encourage that we stick to the scope that we have in front of us and try to fight the urge to fix everything at once in one building that we're just happening to have an emergency situation at. So I'm hopeful that the insurance will have to cover the structural costs as a result of having to honor the coverage scope. So would encourage with our legal counsel in the room, if they fight back, a strongly worded letter is probably a good route, although it sounds like we have a good relationship with them and they've been good to work with, so hopefully it doesn't go there. So I just wanted to offer that because I know it was something that happened at a board meeting that I wasn't in attendance at, so I wanted to admit, the reason I pushed pretty hard on that point.
Thank you. Chris? Oh, no, it wasn't you?
Well, I
You
do
can
have a
make up
question,
one?
yes,
Go
if I
ahead.
may. Thank you, Dr. Lund. So Ms. Galach, and I know Dr. Brenner is there, what are your leanings? What are you thinking? Are you wait for insurance, or where are you at on this?
Well, first of all, I think that the safety and security has to be at the forefront of any of our efforts, and so I do concur with that. As far as maintaining the scope of the project, it makes sense the way that Ms. Mikula explained it. I think that we can weigh that against the need. There's a need for additional space at many of our buildings, right? Many of our campuses. And so it was kind of taking advantage of the opportunity that was in front of us as well. But I do think that the priorities are aligned correctly.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Shannon.
One of the other, I think, items at Trader with the room arrangements was the secured entrance part of it. Now, whether the details come out in what's being proposed at the federal level right now for school safety and some other reform initiatives, there is some line items that are at least being agreed upon for dollars to go to schools to beef up safety and security measures. So it's something that if it evolves, it'll happen before the summer break. So I'm sure folks are attuned to it, but try to get a pulse on that and stay pretty close to what's going on, because that might be an opportunity for some more dollars to come in for those types of security renovations in buildings, or even security systems like this in buildings. So,
Dr. Lund, this is Terry.
Go ahead, Dr. Brenner.
Yeah, I would agree with what everybody has assessed thus far. Initially, when we, got word of, the interest rate going up and that changing the bonding allocation to the district, my first response was, we can't lose our indoor air quality initiative that we have going on. So we wanted to make sure we didn't lose that. There was a bit of a compromise at Schrader in our conversations, and it's just a fluid process. I mean, we can bring one thing to the board at one meeting and it looks like a concrete plan, and then when we went to go through the bonding, interest rates were up, and that just changed the total allocation from about 16 million to about 13.5. So I would support what Mr. Arnold has said, and what what Ms. Galach has said, and what other board members have weighed in on as well. Thank you.
Chris, could you just help explain something to me, just so I understand? You talked about that, because it's in red down here, that Schrader and Valley wouldn't have air conditioning. What you mean is not that they are never going to get air conditioning, but they would be on a little lower priority list. I just don't want the public to think that, well, we're going to do them all, but these two are not. It's just that they would be a little lower on the priority list. I just want to make sure that's what you mean.
Yeah, so our current funding levels and current strategy to fund these projects has us doing quite a bit of work next summer. You'll see that Ben Franklin's and Viking are both included on there, but they're actually not on this list because they're being funded by some other alternative measures. To your point, Dr. Lund, it's important to realize that tomorrow we'll have a different pot of money, right? And we'll continue to focus on improving indoor air quality at those two remaining sites.
Other clarifying questions? Doug, go ahead.
Just a comment as to relate, I mean, we have had prior discussions about a much larger project at Schrader, and so it would only make sense to, that at this point in time, have a little lower priority, because if we did that, it would make much more sense to do it all at once, understanding that anything for Schrader is probably 2 or 3 years away. But.
Any other clarifying questions or comments? If not, you have the administrative recommendation we heard from Ms. Galach and Dr. Brenner and Chris and Brandon. Go ahead, Doug.
I would move that we proceed under the project scenario as presented.
We have a second by Bill. Any further clarifying questions or comments? Seeing none, assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Thank you. Thanks, Chris. Let's move on to item 6I, which is resolution determining no protests were filed. Oh, no, I'm sorry, that's right. You only did the half that one, so.
I apologize.
Carry on with the Brandon show.
So just to continue the second part of the conversation that was had at Finance Committee is that preliminary look at the 22-23 budget. And first and foremost, and now is my cue to let you know, if you do want to turn around, we'll have just a little bit more of a presentation than before. On this first slide, I'm reminding you of what you know better than myself is the process that was gone through as a guiding change document, and really underscoring in that far bottom right corner to achieve sustainable balanced budget with an adequate general fund balance of 15%. That's 15% of annual expenditures. That is firmly in the target throughout this conversation. I also just want to qualify a little bit. The process of budgeting this early in school or educational finance is a little bit problematic. So normally by law, the preliminary budget and levies are required into the count of the auditor by August 10th, and then final budget not till October 10th. It's interesting because our fiscal year starts on July 1st, and all these things are sometimes out of order. But right where we're at today is, as I explained earlier on the monthly update, is we are still bringing together our fiscal year wrap-up and all the numbers that come in. So it's worth noting there's some movement here still. And I want to underscore the word preliminary in this presentation, as it's just going to take time for some things to come in. I've got these two bulleted lists just to exemplify the point, a few examples. The first number of them are related to on the expenditure side of the budget. So that you could see that this could actually create a little bit of a variance, and that's in the multiple millions of dollars. A couple examples there is this time frame. We have those major payroll expenditures ahead of that summer break, depending on how a variety of staff are taking those paychecks. At the same time, tuition, both coming into the district and going out of the district. There's a lot of movement right now as they come in. And then, of course, the programs that run over the summer, summer school and summer activities. On that revenue side, it's just similar that they don't get firmed up until the fall. So in some of these numbers, we have the state early estimated numbers for property tax valuation. For example, initial state aid vouchers are calculated off of that, and they don't firm up until August or September. So it's related to that second bullet point. and I've mentioned a third, but the last is that impact aid, those federal dollars that in that monthly report, it looked like the Fed programs were lagging, only 70% of the revenues were in, or what that number was. That's just the nature of the timing in this process. So that's the new guy's way of trying to qualify how preliminary the budget is as we go forward throughout the year. So this is a summary of what is in the board packet. In the board packet, it's laid out in three primary columns, one being the budgeted number for the year, the second column being how we're tracking on the year, so those actuals year to date, and then lastly, the third column being that projected or that budgeted number. The rows summarized here is the revenue over expenditure and then the calculation of that difference. But then we also remind ourselves of where we started the year as far as that general fund balance goes. We do have that special reserve fund where we can transfer up to 50% of those dollars into the general fund, which is what we would normally do, and then providing that ending balance. So you can see here that we budgeted for just more than a $600,000 loss, and whereas we're tracking, it seems to be quite positive. Both revenues and expenditures are predicted to be more than where they were budgeted at, but with revenues topping out of those expenditures. And so bringing that even to a more healthy balance. When we look forward, myself, Brian Gatsky, that's our accounting supervisor, have been working closely and going through a lot of spreadsheets and getting the advice of the finance committee and other directors and staff to make our best estimates here. And there's a variety of calculations throughout the spreadsheet that we could get into, but really think it's quite possible to be looking at a $114 million revenue side budget with the expenditures just below that at 113.6. So still moving positive into growing that general fund balance with an additional transfer from that special reserve fund. And so that could bring our total to that 9.7 million, and that is 8.6 of our expenses, tying back to that goal of ours of 15% by 2026. So it's on the track there. Now this, again, being preliminary in nature, there's a number of assumptions I wanted to run through here, and just to let you know what some of the calculations have gone into this. So prior, the conversation around this process had been that we would expect a 3% annual increase in property tax, whereas that's coming in. Again, this doesn't get firmed up until August or September, but the preliminary estimate is actually better than. Grand Forks is growing faster than what we thought it was. So that's 4.29% is the estimate right now. The assumption on the state side is, between bienniums, it's pretty well set, but that'd be a 1% increase in per pupil aid. And then due to some recent legislative changes, our impact aid will continue to grow in significance to us, as the state had deducted a good portion of that $3 million, and they've promised to stop doing that. Just over the course of 6 years, they would correct that. So over the next this next year and 5 thereafter, we would see an increase of $375,000 annually realized. And then another assumption we're making on the federal program side for revenues is a 3% annual increase. That will be yet to be seen here. Salaries, this is a little work done prior to us. That 2.4% increase was the expectation, and that carries through on this preliminary budget. Also at the same time, an overall reduction in those salary number by $1 million. That's primarily due to a number of different ways folks would exit the school district, including retirements or just general attrition. It does not include any conversations around RIF or non-renewals. This would just be expected over the course of a few years, and those associated fringe benefits. So those numbers aren't exact. Those were, I think, provided to Finance Committee in February from Scott and my role prior to, and we're carrying that through. Health insurance, it had been built in that we could see a 5% increase. Now that will go down. It has, this actually has yet to be completely built into the budget, but we just gotten quotes and accepted that Blue Cross Blue Shield would provide health insurance for our district, and they came in very competitive, where we're actually seeing an overall 6.9% decrease in those costs. And then a few other additional items here. Early retirement, that was a change that was made as a board level decision. We'll continue to see that when that's not paid out, we'll save on the general fund expenses. And then construction expenditures, I'll jump back to ESSER in one slide. But overall, discussed that with that 10 mills being levied, that'd bring in $2.5 million annually, and then still committed to that $500,000 transfer from the general fund to the building fund. And that's reduced greatly from previous years, whereas that was around $3 million, and the board had decided that we needed to stop doing that. The ESSER funds, through ESSER $2, we're actually able to recapture some general fund expenditures that have already gone out the door that are now can be reimbursed. All the ESSER programs are reimbursement. So to articulate some of those, there are a number of positions that the administration is committed to, but have had a hard time filling over the past year. And so we're able to then use those anticipated expenditure dollars against other positions that were filled. And so all told, between that and some curriculum-based items, gearing up for kindergartens, you can see listed below, we are expecting that we can get reimbursed back into the general fund just over $1 million, which again was already expensed and would just come back favorably on the current fiscal year. So just kind of in review here, that numbers continue to come in over the summer, increasing accuracy in our budgeting purposes and process. So this is a preliminary conversation. We will carry that forward to the August 10th and eventual October 10th date. But it is a positive, the early indicators here, that it continues to move in the right direction. And, and we'll continue to prepare a budget with that. So the next steps for the business office is to refine this budget, continue to work on that, and then put that into a 5-year pro forma to kind of give a sense of where we're headed with that longer term picture. I'd seen that format prior, and I think that would be helpful to keep our goals in mind. Also going through a process of working directly with different administrative heads of programs to make sure that our budget's a good budget, that it's not just calculations, but also informed by what's happening. And then bringing it back to the board by August 8th to have that in front, just to approve a preliminary budget, and then we can get it to the county auditor by that August 10th date. So, with that, I do welcome the comment. If there were conversations that I'm still catching up on and, you'd like to see that in here, that's what this is for. So then we can go back to work on this and continue to get a stronger budget.
Maybe we'll start with the two finance committee members that are going off the board at the end of June and see what their thoughts were. Shannon, Doug, comments, thoughts you have?
I guess I didn't really have much of comments or thoughts on a preliminary budget, besides, I thought it was thoughtful to bring it to the rest of the board to walk everybody through it, considering you're gonna have a new slate of board members. You might be able to help them navigate on the first, or second meeting that they're gonna be here. They're gonna face a preliminary budget vote, and it can be a little bit intimidating, but that was the extent of really the conversation.
Doug?
Yeah, I originally had asked Dr. Brenner that to have a finance committee meeting for this to be presented with the idea that it gave a preliminary document, because by the time the election occurs, you have your organizational meeting in July, and then committees are appointed after that. You really are, I think, ratifying the approval of the appointments at that August 8th meeting. So it's awful hard to have a finance committee and others meet and create a preliminary budget. This provides that basic document that's there, understanding that a lot's going to change between now and August 10th, and then between August 10th and October 10th, but it gives that baseline document that's out there that can get preliminarily approved on an August 8th if necessary. So.
Amber, any comments that you had?
I would just say, when I was new to the board, I didn't have the opportunity to, aside from probably just reaching out if I knew to do that, but I didn't have an opportunity within the orientation to go through or sit down with a business manager and talk about things like what is a transfer to fund number 61, and to understand some of these. I think Dr. Lund said at one time that, you know, he's been on the board for X amount of years and it's taken him half that time to really feel comfortable with school finances. So I would just add that I think knowing we have a lot in the pipeline to consider, a lot of projects, a lot of items that may be tied to a referendum, this Career Impact Academy, I think it would certainly be helpful for part of a new board member orientation to piggyback off of what Dr. Brenner does, to really sit down with the business manager and go over the basics of what all of this entails. But I appreciate coming in earlier to this process than we have in the past. I think it's also going to be helpful as we look to a legislative session next year and start to understand what are the numbers that are coming out of that and how are we projecting those, and having conversations about our budget with those that can impact change at the state level. So it will be good for us to have a head start that way as well.
Thank you. Do we have a fourth person on Finance Committee? Oh, Bill. Bill. I knew there was a fourth. I was trying to remember. Bill, comments you have?
No, I agree with the others. I think also it provides Brandon with some direction for him in his new position, that it helped him moving forward and his assistant work on the numbers. And it just kind of shows that we're digging ourselves out of the hole we were in, and we're going in the right direction.
Other clarifying questions or comments by non-Finance Committee board members? Chris?
Thank you, Dr. Lund. That presentation was not done by a rookie. It was very informative, and we can get into the weeds, yet that really spoke to the realities in a manner that not just the board, but more importantly, the community can understand. So you are no rookie. I think you played in another league somewhere for a while before you came here, so thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Amber.
I feel bad for asking that question after that, but I just have a clarifying question on one of the specific items on page 133. So service awards and employee recognition, the budget was 15,500 and the actual was 664,000. Can you just talk about where that came from?
Yeah, it's not the case.
Oh, okay.
You should see Cindy's face right now. That's not a typo either. It's the way that it's in the system.
Okay.
Actually, I'm going to forget exactly the terminology, but there's a state requirement that we upgrade one of our STAR systems, and it just happened to be put in here. It was an ESSER dollar obligation from the state. We had to pay about 650,000 or whatever it was here. That number is in line. There's just a second number causing a little friction in there.
Mm-hmm.
We need to get it straightened out for that point.
Okay,
yeah.
thank you. I was going to say, maybe there's parties we didn't know about, but.
Any other clarifying questions for Brandon? If not, shall we move on to now to item I, which is resolution determining no protests were filed. Do we need to vote on the preliminary budget? Did you want to vote on that? Or?
I guess the question is, it would probably be good to do that if it has legal effect. I don't know if it has legal effect when there's a new board coming in July, so.
Go ahead.
So this was kind of the conversation around the table, like whether or not it has legal effect. I think because of kind of, this is meant with no offense, the lame duck nature of the current people on the finance committee and sitting at the board table, I think it sends the wrong maybe message, like we're trying to push something that we're not, and I think this was more informational, and I think Amber's feedback is helpful with the new board members. If you can take this preliminary budget that's, I don't know, an advisory agreement from the board that we're supportive of, and sit down with them and explain, they're gonna be asked to make a preliminary approval of, or approval of this preliminary budget at one of their first or second meetings, walk them through it, explain to them how the process works. I think that's I'm more in support of that than trying to make this be the preliminary budget approval and not having that in August.
I think even if we approved a preliminary budget, that doesn't preclude the board in July or August from changing it, so I'm not sure it would make much sense. And it wouldn't be the first meeting, the organizational meeting. It would be August or September, correct?
August 8th.
August 8th, yeah, so second or third meeting, so. Yeah. And we may end up having special meetings to talk about the budget in July, so. Go ahead, Brandon, did you have a comment?
I was, I think Doug had articulated this during the finance committee, is that getting a new group together into a finance committee prior to the August 8th will be a challenge, but with the coordination, we'll be sure that those requirements are met.
I think that's one of the board members' obligations, is to do the work that needs to be done. So, thank you, that was very good, appreciate it. Now can we move on to I?
Yes, we can.
Okay, electronic pages 134 through 137, back to Brandon.
So these next three items pertain to the bond levy that we were just discussing. So the first here is that resolution for determining that no protests were filed. So a little background is that from publishing the resolution for general obligation building fund bonds on April 6th, 60 days needed to pass, and we need to certify that there were no protests provided. And that's what this exactly is. At your place, I apologize, it should have been in the board packet, but at your place is the board manager's certification that no protests were filed. And then so in form here, we would need that the board approve the resolution to determine that no protests were filed with the associated resolution.
And that resolution is on page 135, correct? Electronic page 135.
Correct.
Okay. Clarifying questions or comments from board members? If not, the recommendation is to approve the resolution as outlined on page 135. We have a motion by Doug, second by Bill. Any clarifying questions? Seeing none, assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye. Aye.
Aye. Opposed,
No. Motion carries. Let's move on to item J, which is resolution for authorizing the issuance on pages 138 through 155. Brandon.
So same relevant context here. Resolution authorizes and allows for the sales of bond. It also establishes a term and pricing committee, which would be constituted by Superintendent Dr. Brenner and myself, which would delegate the power and authority to agree with the purchaser on the actual principal amount of the bonds to be issued, the stated maturity dates and maturity schedule, and the specific principal amounts and interest rates for each maturity and purchase price. So administrative recommendations to approve this resolution and allow for that to take place.
Clarifying questions or comments? Cynthia, do you have any questions or comments?
I'd make a motion to approve the resolution authorizing the issuance and sale of limited tax school building fund bonds, Series 2022A, creating a sinking fund therefore and pledging taxes for their payment.
Do we have a second for that motion? Second by Jeff. Any further questions? Go ahead, Amber.
I just have more of a procedural question. So on page 144 of the document, of our notes, item 403, it says the credit enhancement program on June 13th, 2022, the school board adopted a resolution wherein the district elected for issue of the bonds to participate in the school district credit enhancement program. That item is next. So procedurally, would it make better sense to approve the second item first and then this item?
It certainly could. I would respect that for sure.
Because we technically haven't approved the credit enhancement program, which says we have in this document.
Is the board in agreement with that? Cynthia, do you want to rescind your motion, and we'll do it in a second?
Sure, I'll rescind my motion.
And you rescind your second. So let's move on and approve item 6K, the resolution for participation on pages 156 through 158, Brandon, and then we'll come back to that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Century Code establishes this program, which just gives the full-fledged backing of the state of North Dakota behind the bond sale, so it gives us a more favorable interest rate. And so we'd be looking for the recommendation to approve the resolution, which would then allow us to participate in that program.
Clarifying questions or comments about that resolution? Seeing none, do we have a motion and a second? We have a motion by Bill, second by Doug. Assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye. Aye. Those opposed? Those opposed, no. Motion carries. Now let's go back, Cynthia, to the resolution authorizing the issuance of the sale of limited tax building funds 22A, sinking fund, therefore, and pledging taxes. Go ahead, Cynthia.
I'll make that motion to approve. I'm not on that page. Sorry, I was looking at that
That's it.
section.
We
I'll
know-
make the motion.
Thank you. We have a second by Jeff. Any further clarifying questions? Seeing none, assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Let's move on to item 6L, which is authorization to call for property insurance bids, pages 159 through 162. Brandon.
Thank you. So Grand Forks Public School District has worked with Valor Insurance for decades in procuring general liability, automotive, property, and other applicable insurances for the district. And so as a broker, they help select insurance providers, which includes the North Dakota Insurance Reserve Fund and also outside party insurance companies. North Dakota Century Code requires that any state or any school district seeking coverage outside of the NDERF for contracts greater than $50,000 must advertise received sealed bids and award the insurance contract to the lowest bidder. So the district is renewing insurances starting July 1, and property insurance contract does exceed the $50,000 threshold. So per our legal guidance, Laura Cobb, who's here if you have any questions for her, it's recommended that we take this property insurance contract to public bid. So the recommendations for Grand Forks Public School District to advertise seeking sealed bids for property insurance coverages for the school district through the insurance broker, Valor Insurance, and delegate and authorize school district business manager Brandon Baumbach to receive the bids submitted to Valor Insurance and award the property insurance contract to the lowest responsible bidder.
Clarifying questions or comments? Seeing none, do we have a motion and a second? Motion by Jackie, do we have a second? Second by Shannon. Assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries, thank you. Let's move on to item 6M, which is the governing board recommendation for Beacon events, and we have some distinguished guests here tonight. We have our school district attorney, Laura Cobb. We have Grand Forks City Attorney Dan Gallstead, and we have our City Administrator Todd Phelan, and I'm going to turn this over to you, Laura. Thank you for being here.
There. Thank you, Dr. Lund, and thank you, the rest of the school board. And as it is the last meeting before a new board is seated, I'd just like to thank all board members tonight for serving, and excited to see what the next year will bring, but appreciate all of you and the time you've served to our district, so thank you for that. So I'm just going to give a brief background on our next topic, which is Beacon Events, Inc. You're all aware that the board approved a tax incentive financing plan for Beacon Development Project down at the Old Townhouse in downtown Grand Forks for the developer Epic. Through the negotiation with the city for the TIF process, Beacon Events, Inc. was formed, which is a nonprofit entity made up of 9-person board. 3 city board members, 3 school district board members, 2 park district board members, and 1 board member of the developer Epic. That board is going to manage and operate a public plaza as well as city area parking down at that site. The public plaza is going to contain an outdoor hockey rink as well as an outdoor concert venue, which we believe the school district will be able to utilize. Through the negotiation process too, Mr. Gosted and Todd Veland came up with a city management agreement, which the city will take eventual ownership of that public plaza. So tonight we're asking the school board to seat the 3 school board members and to approve the activities director, the buildings and grounds director, and the superintendent, Dr. Brenner, to that Beacon Events Board. So after their initial term, they will serve 3 terms after the initial term, and they will basically manage and operate that public plaza and hopefully get some events down there that can benefit the school district. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Mr. Gosted. He'll be able to provide some background on the formation, the purpose, and the structure of the governing board. Hopefully he'll be able to answer all your questions. If he can't, maybe I can, but I'm sure he will be much better suited to answer those questions, as well as City Administrator Todd Veland. Thank you.
Thank you. Board members, Ms. Cobb described the Beacon Events, Inc. Pretty well. Part of the packet, I think it's page 210, just to give you a sense. The orange area is where the plaza is going to be located, and then the city's also going to own, there's going to be a city parking area in that location. And what happened was this entity, it's similar to what the, if anybody's been at the Lights in West Fargo, they kind of run the same, it'll be similar in that regard, concerts and things like that as I understand it. And what'll happen is the way it's developed is there'll be 3 buildings, mixed-use buildings, I think 7 stories tall, that'll surround the event center. And the TIF, the way it operates is that the taxable portion of those buildings, the incremental value, will apply a mill rate to the incremental value. The city ends up having to buy the plaza from Epic once it's developed. We'll bond that out, and then the TIF is used to repay the bond is the way it'll operate. And the city wanted to have an entity that would manage and run that facility. It would be akin to what we've got at the Alaris Center, where we've got Alaris Center Commission, and then we've hired a management company to run the day-to-day operation. So this Beacon Events, Inc. will operate in that same fashion. There'll be a board of directors, as Ms. Cobb described. There's 3 members of that board that'll be appointed by the city, 3 by the school district, 2 by the park district, and then 1 by the developer itself. I don't expect that the board members will be involved in the day-to-day operation. The expectation, I think, would be that they would hire Epic or affiliate with Epic to run those day-to-day operational matters. A lot of this Beacon Events, Inc. will be subject to city review. Their operating budget, things like that, have to be approved by the city council. So we thought it was in negotiating the TIF, this management agreement came up, and thought it was appropriate to appoint those bodies that would more likely be using the facility, like the park district, the city, the school district, things like that, to be on the members so they have input as to how it might be run. I'd be happy to answer any questions. I'm prepared to answer all the questions on that management agreement if you want to get into the weeds. I doubt you do, but I can answer those questions if you want as well. So,
Questions from board members? I have a really simple one. You're not asking us to approve the articles of incorporation. You're just asking us to approve the 3 members from the school district to be on the board, correct?
Correct. And what happened is the developer actually created the entity in advance, and we had to change the articles to make sure we had the right makeup of the board of directors. So the only thing you're doing tonight is approving those members that the school district would want as board members.
Other clarifying questions from board members? Go ahead, Shannon.
So just taking a look at the Articles of Incorporation, you have 2 from each of the governing, well, I'll say organizing bodies on the TIF funding, but then each one of those has an at-large member, and I was trying to figure out the distinction between the at-large member and the directors that are just the 2 that each one gets.
I don't think there doesn't have to necessarily be any distinction. I think the theory was that if you wanted to hire, appoint somebody that's maybe not with the school district, a community member that the school might want to appoint, the city could do the same thing, but it doesn't necessarily have to be an at-large community member.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Amber.
I have 2 questions. One is simple and might be out of the scope of what you're looking for, but is there going to be only 20 parking spaces right next to this?
For this, but I think they've got parking. I don't know what their full development is, but I think they've got underground parking, but don't quote me on that, for their residents.
Okay, but not for like external use? Like a concert happens here?
Not that I know of, but you'd have to talk to the developer.
Sure, just curious. The second portion is, I'm just wondering if you could help me understand, especially with the TIF process. So the developer applies for the TIF, which was approved by all of the taxing entities. But then it talks about the city of Grand Forks taking eventual ownership. So would, in effect, the city of Grand Forks be benefiting from the tax incentive financing? Do you understand my question, or like,
I think I do.
if the ownership transfers to the city of Grand Forks, are
Yeah.
they now then the beneficiary of the TIF?
We will own the public plaza and the parking spot. Once they build 2 out of the 3 buildings, then we'll have a closing, and we will write them a check for the value of that public plaza and the improvements that they've made to it, okay? And so the city of Grand Forks then needs to go out and bond that out, get a bond issuance to get the proceeds to be able to pay the developer, because in the interim, the developer, as if anybody's been downtown, they're working on it, they'll be expending those dollars, fronting the cost for the public plaza in the interim, and then we'll pay them for, it's not the full amount, we pay them 2/3 of what the plaza is worth, and then once the 3rd building is up, we pay the other 1/3. But once 2 of those buildings come up, we own the public plaza and the parking area. And in order to repay that bond, then those TIF funds come in from the value of the buildings so that we can service that debt. So we have a community asset going forward.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Go ahead, Shannon.
And just to clarify, that's what I recall the initial plan was, so just want to make sure that I'm not misremembering it, and that wasn't something new that I remember that was the proposed, that it was basically a takeout upon certificate of occupancy on at least 2 of the buildings, right? And then it funded that way.
I think with any of these projects or processes, sometimes it takes a couple times to reiterate or say it differently to sink in. So I appreciate the explanation. Again, I think now that you say that, I remember the X to pay for Y conversation happening, but I appreciate that explanation, so thank you.
Any further questions? If not, the recommendation is to appoint the superintendent, Dr. Brenner, the director of buildings and grounds, Mr. Arnold, and the activities director, Mike Meiermeyer, to be on this board.
Question.
Go for it.
Do they, for at least the 2 positions, whoever those 2 are, they would have to be school district employees or school board members? So they're really in their role, are we establishing that? So the president and the superintendent and the buildings and grounds director, I mean, which one of those 3 is going to be the at-large one of the 3 members we're appointing?
I don't know if it matters, but that's why I named their titles and their names, because it covers me both ways. So go ahead, Shannon.
I think operatively, if you look at the articles, it's like the first appointed is for a 1-year term, second appointed is for a 2-year term, and the third appointed is for a 3-year term. And then after their first terms are served, then it kicks into a 3-3-3 cycle, so it's a staggered. So I guess operationally, that's why I asked the question, does it matter? They're all voting members. There isn't any rights that are different amongst them, but who do we want in the first year, and then they're coming back up to the board again?
I guess so. I mean, are we requiring that they be an employee of the district? So if Chris Arnold left three months into his term, does he have to resign and we appoint a replacement? Versus the at-large one, which could continue. That's the only distinction I'm trying to.
I'll defer to our attorneys in the room.
The articles themselves don't describe that situation. But the bylaws that could be adopted by Beacon Events, Inc. could. And in fact, there are bylaws that have been adopted already in advance. I would expect that board of directors could deal with those type of situations, that if somebody is an employee today and leaves, what happens? Is that a vacancy? And in fact, the Articles of Incorporation talk about vacancies, and that entity that appointed that director would then fill that vacant position. So we didn't get into the detail with the Articles of Incorporation because you normally don't. The bylaws are usually the better way to address those issues. And again, that's something that the Beacon Events, Inc. Board of Directors could address.
In any event, if somebody leaves, the school board has the authority to appoint those 3 directors. So if Dr. Brenner goes to some school in California for $1 million a year, we as a board can replace him with somebody else as a director, correct?
Yes. Yeah. There's no limitation in the articles that you couldn't do that.
Go ahead, Chris.
Thank you, Dr. Lund. So now I'm getting into the weeds a little bit, but on letter F, section B, it says one director initially selected and appointed by the school. It doesn't say district or board. So that would be, I guess, a decision the board the district would need to make, or would that come from elsewhere? To identify, is it the district, is it the board?
Is that a defined term? Meaning,
School.
No, I mean, is it actually just a short? I'm just wondering if it's.
I don't, if I infer it's board and somebody else infers it's district.
Well, and if you take a look at, if I could answer the question, it's on page 204. We've defined the term school in that to mean the Grand Forks, North Dakota Public School District, and which appointment and selection shall be by the affirmative vote of the school board. So it's a defined term within the articles.
I stand corrected. I have been schooled.
I'm a defined term kind of a guy in my contracts. If you haven't looked at them, you won't.
Go ahead, Shannon.
So and Lindsay's not here, but so you know that category on your position description that says other duties as assigned? I imagine that if we approve, a position to take on this as a duty of their employment, that gets built into their position description under that catch-all category to a degree, and if they leave that position, it could be a function of their employment, and thus they relinquish that as a part of their position. You could structure it that way, and then it's just a ratification at the board level, and forget having to involve the rest of the board. You've just taken care of it here in-house. But again, bylaws can be amended. You can do it that way too. So just a suggestion. That's an easy approach to not overcomplicate it.
So your suggestion, we assign it by position, not name? Okay, well, I'm waiting for a motion from somebody.
I'll make that motion then. I have to go back up to the memo. Hold on. 163. Yeah.
So I'll make the motion to appoint the activities. Okay, what page is it on? There it is. The district activities director, the buildings and grounds director, and the superintendent of schools.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Second by Doug. Any further clarifying questions or comments? And if
I have a
go ahead, Cynthia.
question, but I'm not sure I'm quite following everybody. But on page 170, it talks about natural persons. What does that mean? And then I think I'm on page 170. And then on 172, I had a question about the meetings are going to be held in Fargo.
Go ahead, Mr. Gulstead, and
Yeah,
explain that for us.
Those are, I think she's referring to the bylaws that were drafted by EPIC before we got involved. My expectation is those bylaws will have to be amended to address those very issues. I can't speak as to why they've selected Fargo other than they're in Fargo. It might have been an oversight. And I think with respect to a natural person, I think it's got to be an individual to be on the board of directors. That's the only thing so again, you'd have to just deal with the bylaws and make some corrections.
Nothing to do with the song Natural Woman at all?
Maybe.
Okay, just checking. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Do we have any further questions or comments? And I think if administration and Laura are not comfortable with how we did it, they can always come back to the board in the future and fix it, so. Okay, assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Thank you three for being here so late, so appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of the evening.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks. Let's move on to other, and I'm going to slide over to the other mic over there. And I know it's been a long night, but I'm only going to talk about these individuals for an hour apiece, so no, I won't talk really long. But we want to honor some people that are finishing with us today, and I've got to find my papers here. So let's start with our student board representatives. And Dr. Brenner was so kind as to write for me, so I'm just going to, he wrote it wonderfully, so I'm just going to say what he had to say. So first I want to talk about Alicia Dela Cruz. She served on the school board for the last 2 years as a Red River High School junior and now senior. She has well represented the voices of 9th through 12th grade students at the board table. She's provided valuable thought and insight into her learning experience, both in a, quote, typical year, which was 9th grade for you, I believe, and also what teaching and learning was like during a pandemic with the hybrid and every other models, which would be her sophomore and junior years, I believe. So Alicia recently graduated with honors and was recently inducted into the National Technical Honor Society and is such a well-rounded person that everybody loves her, but she also loves to dance. And for those of us that got to watch her dance, that was pretty fun too. So Alicia is going to pursue a higher education degree in physical therapy. And with her well-rounded people and academic skills, she is going to have tremendous success. On behalf of the school district and the district leadership, Alicia, we want to thank you for your years of service. And we have a certificate of merit signed by our superintendent of public instructions, Kristen Baszler, and our superintendent of schools, Dr. Brenner. So please come up. And you have 3 minutes to respond.
I'll try to keep it.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Well, I am extremely thankful for being selected to voice for the students of Red River High School. I want to thank each of the school board members for always creating a welcoming environment and always encouraging me. It's been great to work with each of you and get to know all of you. This position has opened up new opportunities for me. So I want to thank everyone in the Grand Forks Public School system that has supported me all the way up. I will always be a Kelly Cougar, Schrader Raider, and a Red River Rough Rider at heart. Thank you.
And even though you named those 3 schools, you were a voice for students throughout the district, as Evan was as well. So Evan Whalen has also served on the school board for the last 2 years as a Central High School junior and senior. His voice, too, was well represented by the students, not only in grade 9 through 12, but throughout the school district. He has also been a constant sideline fan for all Central sports that he didn't participate in, which wasn't many. And he led the Central section with amazing school spirit. One of the memorable moments Dr. Brenner had was in the fall of 2019, right in the pandemic when it was in the full swing, and it was during the Cushman Classic. Evan and a group of other high school students met with Dr. Brenner to discuss how the fans could more actively be engaged during the Cushman Classic. The solution that Evan was participating in, the solution was put the chairs 6 feet apart at the end of the end zone and allow more fans to be in there. And not only were those chairs filled, and not only did they cheer for their 2 teams, they did it in a pouring rain, for those of you that remember that. So Evan's going to pursue a higher education degree in marketing and finance, and we know he's going to do well because he graduated with high academic honors. On behalf of the school board and district leadership, Evan, thank you for your years of service, and I have a certificate of merit for you as well. Thank you. Wait. Try again.
I guess I just want to say thank you for everything. I've learned a lot with you guys, especially like throughout student council. We've learned how like boards and stuff work, and just to be a part of this has made like a big difference in some of that. So it's kind of just a extra bit to my education as well, the opportunities that it's opened up for me for being a part of this. I was a little bit confused when I was like first asked. I didn't really know what this was even like a thing for students to do, but I'm very glad I got the opportunity to do so and be able to talk with all you guys and be able to make connections, and I'm just very thankful for all the opportunities that you guys have given me. So yeah, thank you.
We also have 3 board members that are going off the board at this time. Shannon Mikula, we want to recognize her for her term from 2018 through the June of 2022. I will always remember Shannon with her deep probing questions that really helped clarify some of the most difficult issues I've dealt with, and I've been on the board for 22 years, and her deep probing questions helped clarify a lot of those issues, and I think the rest of the board really appreciate that. Not only has she been an excellent board member at our board meetings, but she's also served on several very important committees, including finance, as you heard tonight, teacher contract bargaining, and local government advisory committee. So on behalf of the school board and the district leadership, I want to thank her for her years of service. We also have a certificate of merit for her, and we also have what's normally called a golden age pass, but she's too young to be golden age, so it's a lifetime achievement activity pass. So Shannon, thank you for your years of service.
Oh, boy, give a lawyer a mic and just wait to see what she says. No, I've really appreciated the experience to serve in a local governmental position and be a democratically, elected representative of the community. I don't think any of us on this board or in this district or in this world thought we would experience the last 2.5 years. But I like to think we got through it. As a community, I think we've gotten through it, and I think there's some bigger issues that have kind of exposed themselves about how important schools are at the heart and center of a community, so always keep that in mind. that people rely on us for a lot more than just teaching. It's really the life of the community. So I wish you guys all the best in the upcoming years. I'll definitely always be keeping an eye on what's going on here, and don't worry, I'll show up and ask some probing questions if things are getting off the rails, but I know it's in good hands. I'm very much looking forward to getting to do another public service, which is invest more time with my own kids. I think it's a good time for me to take the foot off the gas of trying to be involved in everything I possibly can be, but once they no longer want to spend time with me, I may consider coming back to the board because it was a good experience. And overall, I'd like to think that I helped leave it a little bit better than when I found it. So I hopefully did that. So thanks, you guys.
Congratulations, Shannon, and when your kids become teenagers is when you'll be back to the board because they won't want you after that, so that'll be a few years though. Christopher Douthit, we want to thank him and recognize him for his most recent term, which was started in 2020 and ends in June of 2022, but previously he, as you all know, he was on the board starting in 2018 and then graciously resigned in 2019 to become the interim principal at Schrader Middle School when we needed a principal there, and was gracious enough to do that. He's also, as I think everybody in this room knows, has had long-term service to the school district as an educator and as an administrator. I think of Chris as being the conscience of this board, and he's worked with dignity and grace through the years, and I think I consider him my moral compass, so I bounce things off of him. Not only has he been fully engaged at the full board, but he's been very involved with committees, including classified employees recently, policy review, and the school board self-assessment. So Chris, on behalf of the school board and the district, thank you for your years of service, and you do get a golden age pass because of your age. So.
I missed my line at the start of the meeting tonight with the anesthesia. I should have said I bit off more than I could chew last night. What I would like to do is I look around the room and I'm looking at the Herald. You know, we have Pam's here, we have our legal counsel here, we have the board here, and I look at each one of you, the students, and I just have a fond memory of what something has occurred or happened, whether it's in a meeting or elsewhere. And you're all true servers. You give of yourself, you give of your time. And there's so much I could address from two parents that I had their children and many others yet. I'm going to take a moment to address two people in specific. First off, I hope I don't take any thunder. Mr. Carpenter, what you have done for this community I'm going to access 20 years of service as a member of boards, and some of the things that you've endured and led and done through grace and kindness is to be applauded. For this community is going to miss all that you have provided. And we have a silent partner in this room. I think Cindy Johnson got a law degree, just forgot to tell us all. I'll tell you what, when you want to know what's going on with the North Dakota School Boards Association, when you want to know what's taking place with a policy, a procedure, a document, she knows it from 10 years ago, 12 years ago. She is spot on with us and certainly takes us the way, doesn't lead us, but she certainly provides the guidance that we need to do the proper work. And you are such an unsung hero to this board, to this community, and to this state, and you are absolutely an outstanding human being who is just so kind. And with that, I just want to say thanks to all of you. It's been a real pleasure, and it's been a lot of fun. And Mr. Palmasino, thank you, sir. Thank you for what you've done with the Park District as well. Thank you.
He shut it off by habit. So. Douthit said exactly what I was going to say about Doug. But no, we want to recognize Doug Carpenter for his 9 years of service on the board. He was initially appointed in November of 2013 to fill a vacancy, and then was subsequently elected 2 different 4-year terms, which will end at the end of June of 2022. And just to dovetail on what Chris had said, a lot of people don't know because you're too young, but Doug served on the city council for 14 years, of which several of those years were as president. And oh, by the way, it was right before and several years after that historic flood of '97. He was on the city council. So what he's done for this community is tremendous. He's been an inspirational leader to me. He's somebody I try and emulate because of how he works and his grasp for details. And I think he's made us all a much better board. And not only do I think that, I think the board thinks that because he was our school board president for 4 years. So that says something when your colleagues are appointing you as school board president. And then again, most recently on some of the committees he's been on, as you all know how instrumental he's been on finance, teacher contract, bargaining, and also superintendent evaluation. So Doug, thank you for all that you've done for the school district on behalf of us and district leadership. Thank you. And you are also of the age that you get a golden age pass too. So.
Well, this has been a privilege for these last 9 years. I got a feeling, though, there's not going to be any other elected body that will let me serve because I ended city council with a major flood and ended school board with COVID. So they may not let me on anything. I've enjoyed with all the people that have been on this board and that I've worked with. Didn't always agree with everybody, but everybody's always had the best interests of the students in this district at heart. Despite what we hear sometimes in the press and on talk radio that we really don't care about kids, we do. And so good luck to all of you that will continue on the board. I think the addition of student school board members was a wonderful thing, and I hope that the next two can live up to these two. So, and I appreciate the work of the teachers and the teacher union and what they've done and their cooperative attitude. For a while there was a little adversarial, but I think we've got a good working relationship that will help this district going forward. So again, thank you for the opportunity and good luck in the future.
Well, I know the 5 that are leaving the board are not done in their public service because I know the type of people they are, and the 5 of you are going to continue to do public service. It may not be elected, but you're going to continue to do the betterment for the good of mankind. I'm too tired to walk back there, so I'm just going to finish the meeting from up here, if you guys don't mind. One other announcement I have is if you haven't heard, there's an election tomorrow. If you haven't voted early, please get out and vote. It's really a privilege and a right to vote, and I don't think people in the United States understand that there are billions of people across the world that don't get to pick their leaders. They don't get to pick their school board members or their mayors or their city council members or their state legislatures or their federal government people. It's really a privilege and it's a right that we have. So if people haven't gone out and voted, please get out and vote because the election is tomorrow. Our next meeting, for those of us that are going to still be on the board, is on July 11th, which will be the annual meeting. And I didn't have any other announcements. Catherine, do you have any announcements?
I have a super quick announcement. First of all, I want to reiterate everybody's thanks for the board members who are leaving, and actually for everybody here. Serving the public is not an easy task, especially in times when there is disagreement. And there's just been nothing but the utmost respect and decorum overall, and just excellent displays of leadership. And that really does reflect on our buildings and it reflects on our students. So you're watched by our public. And I just appreciate the fact that you're willing to step into this role and all the work that you've done in the name of kids, because it's not easy and you put in a lot of hours, and I don't think you get enough credit for that. So thank you, and thank you to our student board members as well. And then lastly, it's just kind of a small announcement, is that in your packets there was walked in an email from a student that went to our general email, the board site. That doesn't go directly to you, it goes to our communications director, so we want to make sure that you have that information in front of you.
Thank you. Brenda, do you have any announcements? Melissa, any announcements? Okay. Board requests for future consideration. Seeing none, Mr. Douthit, How do we do with our school board norms?
Dr. Lund, I thought the norms were very well managed by the board this evening.
Thank you. You are adjourned. Have a great evening.